Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Zero Distortion. Today, we're cutting through the BS around EVs. EVs meaning electric vehicles. What's real, what's propaganda, and why so many people are still stuck in 2015 when it comes to EVs. Joining us is Jess Shanahan. She's a data storyteller, a journalist, and founder of Charge Happy. She's been on the front lines of the EV conversation, calling out misinformation and helping people actually understand what this tech is and what it isn't. From battery myths to charging anxiety to media fearmongering, we're covering it all. So let's get into it. Jess, welcome to Zero Distortion. It's great to have you on.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, we really appreciate it. You have certainly built a reputation for cutting through that EV misinformation with clarity, and I'll even say sometimes a little bit of fire, if that's fair to say. So for folks who might not know much about your work yet, can you kind of give a quick snapshot of your journey, how you ended up right in the middle of this EV storytelling world?
Yeah, of course. So on the surface, I think it looks like I do quite a lot of stuff, but a lot of it is very, very connected. So I've been a journalist and content creator running my own content marketing agency since 2012. And it was in 2016 that I really kind of like dove into the world of e-mobility. I did a 2,500-mile road trip around the UK and Ireland in an electric car and just fell in love with it. And as I started writing more about EVs, I got my own electric cars. I really began to realize that not a lot of people know what it's like to drive one, or there's lots of misinformation out there, as we know. And as someone who creates content and as someone who is quite technical, but also has been driving EVs for a long time, I kind of got to the point where I was like, okay, well, I can do a bit of myth busting. I can share my experiences and that kind of thing. And I do that by writing for brands who are in the e-mobility space, by creating videos. I create EV FAQs on my YouTube channel, and also by posting on LinkedIn and doing data stories and things like that to really combat, what people kind of have maybe been told by the media, and turning that into something and saying, well, actually, no, it's not like that. And here's the data or the experience to kind of back it up. So it's been very, very much a journey from I fell in love with electric cars as a petrol head as well. And just kind of wanting to share those experiences with people who may not be getting information from the most neutral of sources, let's say.
That's a politically correct way to say it for sure. Yes, I totally get that, and I'm very similar. I've been driving an EV for years, and I just didn't know until I got in one and tried it out. And that totally changed my perspective. It was just such a transformation in the view I had. And I'm pretty open-minded, but I was like, I don't know, electric vehicles. And so whenever you actually get that data, once you got, sat behind the wheel of an electric vehicle, that's what I tell people, just try it and see, because to me, seeing / driving is believing. So I think we're aligned on that.
Absolutely, yeah, and I agree with you on getting people behind the wheel. But I think there's so many people who are like, no, electric cars are boring, they're rubbish. I don't like it. And I'm like, have you driven one? Because actually, most people who do kind of sit in one, and if they're doing something like, I don't know, the school run or a commute, or driving to a work event, they're like, oh wow, life is so much easier when driving electric. And sure, like, you might not want to take your average electric vehicle on a racetrack for fun reasons, but how many times are we doing that with our daily drivers anyway?
Yeah, the majority of people have, I want to say it's less than a 20-mile commute in the US. I don't know if that data is still accurate or not, but that's what I've got, the number I've got in my head. So yeah, I've been driving. My wife, she drives an electric vehicle. She commutes every day, and no problem whatsoever in the money that we've saved from purchasing gasoline.
Yeah.
We have definitely noticed that, and haven't really noticed much of an increase on the electricity bill for charging at home, which is where we do 95% of our charging at least.
Yeah, it's similar here. I've saved a ton of money by having electric cars, just because it is so cheap to, I think I can charge up about 300 miles for less than £5. So when you compare that to fuel prices over here, that's a significant saving. it's not as cheap if I have to charge publicly. But again, like you, that's such a small part of how I charge that I really don't notice it. And I certainly haven't noticed it on my electricity bills either.
Yeah, and even when you do charge with public charging, it's still, in my experience, it's still way cheaper than fueling up, the petrol car, as you say.
So it depends over here. It depends where you charge. If you're doing like a slower AC charge, it's definitely cheaper. But I find that if I go to a motorway service station and charge, it's about on par with a relatively efficient petrol vehicle. So it really does depend. But yeah, there are so many kind of pros that outweigh that one thing that's normal. And obviously I'm not doing that much public charging at the most expensive motorway service station. That's not how I like to travel. And again, like most of my charging's at home where it's incredibly cheap.
Yeah, yeah, that's where most people are going to do that, and that's the same thing we've seen. We experience it every day. Either my wife or I are plugging in when we're home, and it's very simple, very convenient. I don't really even think about it. It's just, instead of having to stop at that gas station, oh, I'm on the way home and I need to fuel up. Now you go home and plug in, and it saves time, I would say too. But that's kind of been my experience. And let's talk a little bit about storytelling, and in particular data storytelling. You do a lot of that, and
Yeah.
I agree, it changes minds. So what do you see as the biggest maybe misconception, or the way you've been able to message this where people can actually comprehend that data and understand, okay, I was thinking it was A, but actually it's B that I'm dealing with?
Yeah, I think a lot of people in any industry, and I think this is just the way that we've learned to consume content in recent years, people will see a headline and take that as gospel. And it's very, very rare that even something that has a bit of, a clickbait headline, it might have the actual true statistics and information contained within the article, but no one's clicking that far. They're only looking at the headline and going, well, EVs catch fire more than ICE vehicles. So what I'm trying to do is firstly get information in front of people in a way that's, you don't have to click through an article that's full of ads and it jumps around and then you've got to accept cookies and all of this kind of stuff. Very, very hard to consume media these days just because of the nature of how things have changed online. So people don't want to read an article. So I'm trying to create things that get across information in a really short, sharp way. So whether that's like an EV FAQ where it's like, here are the facts, here's some pretty pictures, here's a graph, like I'm keeping your attention. Or whether it's with something that's a bit more hard hitting, like on LinkedIn recently, I shared a graphic that showed the proportion of different vehicle fuel types, and their likelihood to catch fire normalized out of 100,000 vehicles. And it is literally, it looks like a little flame. And I recently found that data is quite flawed, but in the absence of better data, that's the best that we could work with. But I think that graphic made a lot of people go, oh, actually, electric vehicles aren't actually catching fire all of the time. There might be a different issue with thermal runaway and how hard they are to put out if they catch fire. But actually, we're not at risk of random, spontaneous, combustion of,
Right.
of EVs, and it's more likely to happen actually with hybrids or internal combustion being the word, engine vehicles. So it's about presenting facts, I guess, in a way that is cutting through clickbait headlines, because I don't know what it is about the media, and there's tons of conspiracies out there that X website is funded by oil companies and they don't want people to adopt EVs and all of that kind of stuff. But
Right.
they obviously want the headlines that are going to be the most exciting and the most grabby. And saying, actually, we're all safe driving EVs isn't that exciting. No one's going to click that. They're going to go, oh, good, and then go buy a car.
Yeah.
So what I'm trying to do is, I don't want to sensationalize. I don't want to do too much that's clickbaity in the other direction. But I'm trying to do something similar that grabs attention in the way that those headlines do, because I think that's the only way we're going to reach people, because we're all broken by social media and the internet, and it's hard to pay attention to a long article that has all the facts and all of the well balanced information.
Yeah, I say all the time, if you want to find something good about a subject, it's easy to find. If you want to find something bad about a particular subject, that's easy to find as well. It's whatever the algorithm and your search engine ends up doing for you. And kind of sorting through those can be pretty I don't know, daunting of a
Mm.
task. And yeah, the thing about electric vehicles is the headlines are very sensational for those that don't like them, right?
Yeah.
They're gonna catch on fire, whatever type of statistics they put out there, when it really is very rare. I mean, those things happen for sure. I don't think either of us are going to deny that, but
Mhm.
it's so rare. It's a sensational type of thing that they put out, where the stuff that I think is, I'll call it really sexy about electric vehicles, are the things that maybe people want to hear about, maybe they don't. But whenever
Mm.
you have the fire emoji and a picture of an EV burning and you can't put it out, that is clickbait for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think the more that we can do to tell those, not just the sexy stories, because I obviously want to talk about how high tech an EV is and like the stuff that I find really exciting. But I think the thing that is probably going to change people's minds more is seeing a lot of content about just how normal it is to drive an EV. Like, I drove my car on a long road trip, I charged, I got to my destination, and then I drove home. That might be really, really boring, but the majority of people, that's all they're doing is they're driving from one place to another. They might go somewhere
Yeah.
cool on the way, but that's it. So I really want people to just share, not even just good experiences of driving an EV, but just the normal ones. So now anytime I do a trip, that no matter how kind of mundane it is, I'm like, I drove my car today. Just because the more people see that, I'm not on fire, I'm not stranded, and I'm allowed to use my air conditioning, the more that we're going to be able to like combat that misinformation by just showing we're all doing this and you're stuck there reading a Daily Mail headline.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very true statement. I would ask, where do you see the biggest opportunities to tell these stories about electric vehicles, and those being very effective as far as reaching the audience where they can easily digest? You made a fantastic point about not having to really digest an article and paywalls and everything, the cookies and all that. What's been your experience as far as the best way to get that message out?
So I think the best thing we can do is just talk to people in person. So having those conversations about what it's like to drive an EV, or saying to family and friends, yeah, I'll drive to this road trip or this family party or whatever, come in my very, very swish, very, very comfortable electric car. We'll stop for a coffee on the way and then we'll drive home. And they go, oh, it's actually that easy. But in terms of sharing content online, it's difficult because no matter what social platform you go on, you're always going to find the opposite viewpoint and the people trying to pull you down and the people telling you you're wrong and all of this kind of thing. I find
Yeah.
LinkedIn to be a little bit more balanced, not always. And I think it is going the way of, YouTube comments and X and stuff. But I find LinkedIn's quite good because, I mean, this is a complete assumption, but I would assume that people on LinkedIn probably have a slightly higher level of critical thinking skills than maybe just, the average person who is just angrily on something like X trying to find someone to argue with.
Yeah.
Could be wrong. I've seen my own LinkedIn
No,
comments. I know what it's
I
like.
think you're right.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I can see it kind of moving a little bit more in that direction, especially here in the States. With regards to LinkedIn, they're really, before, I'm going to say, probably 5 years ago, to me, my experience was it was very much a professional platform.
Mm.
And as time has gone on, and I'm going to say here in the States, you see a lot more political content that I didn't notice before, but we're going through a different time here. So it does kind of make sense that you would see that, because I don't know if this is a new normal. I hope not, but right now it's normal for that type of stuff to be out there.
Yeah, and I would say it's kind of similar here. Obviously, not as politically divisive as maybe what's going on in the US, but certainly people are pushing more to share their opinions in a way that they might not have done before because they wanted to hide behind professionalism. But I think now that, I don't know what's caused this, but now people are just going, hey, it's my opinion, it's fine, this doesn't represent my company, and here is just some awful stuff about you and your ideas, is what it seems to be moving towards. And that also, though, might be just a thing that I've seen from just gaining a load of new followers maybe over the last 3 or 4 years. So it could also just be that I am reaching the wrong people because my content is going further.
Yeah, I would agree with that. That there are some folks that even have on their profile, my opinions are mine alone and don't reflect my company or something, which I don't know if that disclaimer works or not, but I guess they put it on there. We've seen a lot more of that as well. So just, I think we're kind of mirroring each other as far as what we're seeing on that particular platform of engagement and people. The ones that I'll have more respect for are the ones that'll actually have their full name and an actual picture.
Yeah.
The ones that don't have a picture and they'll have, a first name and an initial or something. And I'm not saying they're not legit, but those ones I've seen in my personal experience seem to be a bit more rogue with comments.
Yeah.
If you will.
Yeah, I know what you mean. For me, it's anyone who, if I see any name where they're kind of like their tagline is retired, I'm like, oh, this is either going to be just a very, very normal comment or the worst one I've seen. And it's usually the latter, unfortunately, because they've got no, they've got no professional standards to kind of fall in line with of whatever company that they work for, because they now no longer work for a company. So yeah, there's like an ongoing joke between me and, a few people within my circle about, a retired person has come into the comments, look out kind of thing.
Yeah. And on, kind of pulling that thread a little bit, a lot of these folks that I've seen we talk a lot about clean energy and stuff in our space, and EVs are obviously part of that. But a lot of the folks that comment, they really don't have a clue what they're talking about. They'll just pull a headline, or it's just something that's come up in their head, and they're willing to type that out. And whenever it comes to EVs, one of the first things I'll say, or a question on a comment is, have you ever driven an EV? Have you ever even, rode in an EV? And either they'll not engage at all, they'll deflect, or they'll say, no, I haven't. Okay, well, how do you have any authority to be talking about this, right? I'm not a pilot, right? I've never flown a plane, so how could I be commenting about how someone should be piloting? I've got no business doing that. So I don't know. Are you seeing some of that too, where people, they just heard some rumors or want to spread some myths?
Yeah, and I think this is the thing about having access to all of the world's information in the palm of our hands, is that we, there's this chance that if you scroll enough stuff and you look at enough stuff, you can feel like an expert, when actually there's a lot more nuance behind something than a headline, or even, reading a whole article or a white paper. If people aren't having that lived experience and they are just doing the research, sure, they might be able to come up with good arguments, but they've got to do it from a point of view of like, I'm not an expert, I've seen this, can we discuss it? And I've had people disagree with me on LinkedIn, and I love it when they do it in a respectful way and it turns into a discussion. And I love being told I'm wrong, because then I get to learn. And even if it's by someone who has just done a bunch of research but doesn't happen to be an expert, that's fine. I will go and read up on something and change my point of view, because I'm a critical thinker. And I think if we all approach the internet and these topics like clean energy and electric cars with that kind of mindset, then we can discuss what's good, what's bad, and what's, kind of average, without getting into arguments where people are just being rude and aggressive online.
Yeah, there's a lot of that, unfortunately. And I'm of the same mindset. I'm not perfect. That's one reason, I do these podcasts. I'd like to have these conversations and learn. Some things I know a little bit about, like EVs. I've got a little bit of knowledge on that, and then I'll speak with folks that I have no clue about the topic. I want to learn and I want to talk to the people that understand. So, point taken. I think you're exactly right. And tell us a little bit, kind of getting into the messaging and engagement, but charge happy.
Mm.
That Tell us about that. And I know you mentioned earlier about the road trip that you took in an EV. It was 2,500 miles or something.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear more about Charge Happy and, of course, that trip.
Yeah. So I've obviously been driving electric for a long time, almost 10 years. And one of the things I love, and actually I even loved before I was driving electric, was road trips, but I would just stop at every single stop along the way. Like, I'm not about, right, can I drive 300 miles to get to my destination and then enjoy that? I'm like, well, what cool place could I see along the way that I might not want to stay at, because maybe you can't stay there, but I want to experience. So when we were on, it was called Route 57, this long road trip in 2016, we were stopping at places like, it was April and we stopped at Aviemore in Scotland, which is a ski resort. There was no snow, but it was like such a cool place just to stop. We didn't charge, but we drove on a bit and then we charged later on. And it was just about stopping, pausing, experiencing something new and then moving on. And taking, I think it was just over 3 weeks to do, 2,500 miles, really kind of taught me that actually this is the way that I love to travel. And even when I've done road trips in the US or around Europe, it's always about, actually, let's only do, a drive of 100 miles, but let's make it take all day because we want to go here, there, and everywhere on the way. So Charge Happy was kind of born from that love of travel and that love of slow travel and road trips, because we can charge at motorway service stations and it's very convenient and it's easier than ever. But actually, that's not the most fun way to charge. I do it if that's convenient, or if I'm traveling for work, or if I do literally need to plug in, go grab some food and then leave, because obviously so fast now. But what I try to do, especially if I'm, traveling for fun, is just find somewhere cool to stop that has maybe a slower charge, but I can spend all day either drinking coffee or walking or exploring. And that's always been my approach. And then I got talking to some people. I was on the EV Cafe podcast and we were talking about this approach to charging and how it should be a pleasurable experience. And I was like, I really need to do this thing that I've been thinking about doing for so long. So Charge Happy was kind of born of that. And it's a Substack newsletter, but in the future, I'm hoping it will be a standalone app and website. So it's a little bit more kind of searchable and practical for people who are on the move. But right now it's very editorial focused. I'm sharing just the great places to charge around the UK at the moment, but we are going to be branching out further. But right now it's kind of my own personal experiences backed up by community submissions as well. So anywhere that has a charger nearby, or a location that has destination charging, I'm sharing those and talking about like what's great about that place or the area, so people, when they are traveling from, let's say, one side of the country to the other, they know that if they want to stop and charge and want to make a day of it, they've got so many great options.
Like an EV charging travel guide of what's out there. No, I love that. That's because it is an experience. I mean, that's one thing that I've heard people say, well, I can't take a road trip because I have to find a charging station and then I've got to spend, an hour there. And to me, I'm like you. I mean, are there times when I really need to get from point A to point B as fast as possible? Okay, yeah. But really, for my lifestyle, what I do, I've got to take a trip. All right, the charging stations are easy to find, and they're becoming easier to find, and they're getting better and better. Still a long way to go, but continued improvement for sure. And I'm able to. All right, I've got to stop. All right, bathroom break, maybe get something to eat. But I'm more productive because I can pull out my laptop or I can just get on my phone and do this work that, kind of keeps me up to date on things. I can respond to that email. I can post that LinkedIn article. I can do whatever I need to do. And it takes a bit of that anxiety away and that feeling of, I've got so much to do whenever I get to my destination. Have I missed something? Have I done this and that? No, I mean, to me, it's made me more productive because I can continue to do whatever while I'm traveling and plug in and charge at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's also the safety aspect to it. Like the amount of people that say to me, I do a 500-mile trip twice a year. I can't possibly have an electric car. I'm like, how are you driving 500 miles without just stopping for a bathroom break, right? Like, I mean, I need a coffee, I need a snack, I need to nip to the loo. But like, okay, let's say people are just doing the whole thing. That's not safe. And I think the guidance is no more than about 2 hours, 200 miles, something like that. I can't remember the specifics before you should take a break. And, professional drivers know this, that, you can't be on the road for over a certain amount of time. You have to have a stop. So why are so many people just driving 400 or 500 miles without a stop? I genuinely can't get my head around it because I can only go about 150 miles before I need a coffee and, a bathroom break.
Yeah, I I'm guilty of that. I'm going to say probably 10 years ago, maybe a little less, but that was how I lived. I'm in a rush. I'm in a hurry to get from point A to point B. All right, I'm up and I'm driving and I need to go as fast as I can within the speed limit, blah blah blah. But get there as fast as I possibly can, and the breaks would be as short as possible. Right. All right,
Mm.
gas up, run in and hit the bathroom, grab a coffee for on the go, and I'm back on the road. But it wasn't as healthy. I mean, I've got a bad back, so me personally, being able to stretch and walk around for a little bit as opposed to, just a couple minutes to gas up. Um, Again, personally, this has been very helpful for me, just in changing, I guess my philosophy on road travel.
Mm. Yeah, and I think, we're all as humans in this mindset of, well, if we've always done it this way, why would we change? Even if it's
Yeah.
better, they're like, yeah, but we've always driven without stopping or with like the smallest possible stop. So why would we do it any differently? And I think a lot of people aren't willing to accept that actually it's safer, it's nicer, it's more fun. You'll arrive at your destination more relaxed and more alert, and like you're not going to be knackered from a long drive, let's say. And I feel like this is something that non-EV drivers don't realize, because I don't think it's out there in the media a lot, that actually, if you do want to do 300 miles without stopping, it's easier in an EV. So like since I got my Polestar 2, which I've got the long range version, which does, if I'm on a motorway, it's probably like 280 miles. So I can do quite a long journey now, like a good, like over 3 hours without stopping if I want to. But because it's such an easy driving experience, and I have very, very fast charging if I do need to stop, I'm not just kind of ruined by the end of that journey. If I have been in a rush, I can just do it and, turn up to my destination and I'm good to go. Whereas I found that, I mean, I've always driven, silly little hot hatches, which maybe not the most comfortable petrol cars to drive, but certainly like driving my old Arbath 500, great car, but driving that over a long distance probably had the same range as my Polestar, thinking about it, but was tiring because it was rumbly and big stiff suspension, changing gears, all of that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, loved that car. It was brilliant. But just the smoothness of an EV is it's just so refreshing and just so easy.
Yeah, my stepdaughter, I let her drive my Tesla the other day, and she she was amazed. She goes, "This is so smooth." This is she was like fell in love pretty quick.
Mm.
And get like we were talking earlier, just get behind the wheel, take a test drive. These dealerships love for you to come in and take a test drive. Just go do that. Whether you're thinking about buying one or not, just to get a little better idea and understanding. And if you are one of those people that need to, oh, I've got to drive 300 miles because that's how I'm wired. Like you said, it's possible. That's not something that can be done in EVs. The battery technology gets better. That means the range gets better. and the charging technology continues to improve. So we're in the early stages, still very much doable in today's society, but it just continues to get better. So I would say people, if you've got a certain style, that's okay. It's here, right? And it just continues to get better. I'd like to talk a little bit about, you said you're a petrol head, and I know you are a fan of racing. Can you talk to us a little bit about that? What have you always been into that? And how does that tie in with kind of what you're doing these days?
Yeah, so I've always loved cars and motorsport, but I really got into Formula One, I think back in like 2008, just because I had friends who were into it. I started watching it and I was like, this is great. Like, what a
Have you
great
seen that new
spectacle.
movie yet?
No, I haven't. I
I
haven't.
think it's called F1 with Brad Pitt.
Yeah, no, I haven't seen it yet. I actually, over the last maybe 5, 6, 7 years, I've kind of fallen out of love with Formula One. I think I let it run its course for me. I got obsessed over it. I made it my career. Got really involved in it. I was an F1 journalist, and then my interest kind of tapered off as I kind of moved into other things. But I do really want to see that movie.
I've heard
But
people that said they didn't know anything about Formula One, and they watched that movie and they learned so much, and they
perfect.
really became a fan of the sport.
Yeah, it's like with Drive to Survive, the Netflix series that talks about Formula One. Like loads of people have got into it from that, and I think that's brilliant. And I think if I haven't seen Drive to Survive, I think if I did, I'd be hooked again. So yeah, I really love Formula One, and I got involved in racing just because I was like, I want to make my interests my entire career and personality, because why not? That's the joy of being self-employed. And I started working with racing drivers, and coming from like a PR and marketing background, I was quite good at like the sponsorship and sales side of things, and like the marketing of drivers and all of that kind of stuff. And I was running a Porsche race team for a short while, because why not? That was a lot of fun, just for 1 year.
Wow.
But during that time, I kind of thought no one knows how to get sponsorship, and like motorsport is built on the drivers themselves paying into teams to then go racing, especially at like the lower levels, right? So I was like, something needs to be done to teach these like excellent athletes how to do the business side of motorsport. So I set up my own company, Racing Mentor, back in 2017, released a book called Get Paid to Race in 2018, and now kind of coach drivers from all over the world basically on how to build a brand, sell themselves, get sponsorship, all of that kind of stuff. And that, like, as motorsport moves, and it's moving a little bit more slowly than maybe like consumer vehicles, but a lot of motorsport is moving electric. Like, I'm going to the Formula E tomorrow in London, and I'm hopefully going to be heading up an e-scooter racing team as well. And a lot of the drivers I work with are moving into electric motorsports. So there is like a little bit of crossover there now, which is really exciting.
That's really cool. I love what you're doing with helping these drivers to succeed getting into this, because it makes me think of like pro athletes here in the US. They know their sport, right? That's what they are. They're an athlete, and some may have a little bit better business sense than others and personal finance. And there are now some groups out there, some companies that help to actually manage and take care of this. You hear these horror stories of athletes who were scammed of all their money, right?
Yeah.
And it's good to see something happening in motorsports. I really hadn't thought about that. That's great.
Yeah, and it's really fun. And I get to be, involved with drivers. I get to go to races, I get to create content on this stuff. And it kind of blends my love of, being an entrepreneur, because, I run several companies and that's why I am. And it kind of blends that and that teaching with what I love about motorsport. And now there's like the electric side being woven in as well. So it's a really great space to be in.
That's something I had really not thought about. That I learned something every podcast, and I've learned a few things here, and that one really sticks out because I don't know, it's very interesting and very important. So that's
Mm.
cool. Well, as we close out here, a couple, I'll call them little fast round questions for you. So What would you say if you had, like, say, a minute, 60 seconds to address a room full of, let's say, EV skeptics? What would your message be to those folks?
I think it'd be what we've just talked about, like go and drive one. And I don't think I would necessarily focus on things like it's cleaner, it's better for the environment or any of that stuff, because I think that's where people kind of, that, they get their backs up. But I'd talk about, you're going to have a smoother journey. You're going to save a ton of money. You're not going to be paying out on maintenance on your vehicle. And like overall, you're just going to have like just a more enjoyable ride for like day-to-day driving. I'd focus on those like human benefits, because let's face it, when people are, buying an electric car, they're rarely thinking about the environment. It might be a good bonus for a lot of us, but I think people who are maybe a bit skeptical will probably be more focused on, well, actually, is it going to save me money? Is it going to, make my work life easier? All of that kind of thing. I think focusing on those human benefits.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. To me, the sustainability and the those aspects as far as the emissions, those are very important. But
Mm.
I'll use that word sexy again. It's not sexy to people, but whenever you're talking about performance and comfort and reliability and all that, okay, those are buzzword terms that people can relate to, and they're more interested in that. So I think you're spot on with that. And so, last question here: what's going on? I know you talked a little bit about some things happening. Anything else with Charge Happy or just your work more broadly that you're excited about that's coming up?
Yeah, so this has really been the year for like really extending what I'm doing as a speaker. So I've done a lot on stage. I has hosted at the commercial vehicle show. I did some work with Move Mobility. I've got Everything Electric coming up, Elemental London, loads of cool stuff. So it's been really nice to do a lot of that, because, what I was saying earlier about interfacing directly with people to tell our stories and to talk about EVs and clean energy is so important. So I'm really excited that I've got lots of events like that coming up. Also, hopefully going to be working on a new book that I will share the details of soon, but one that's, very much automotive rather than motorsport this time. So lots of fun stuff coming in the future, and I'm going to keep going with the Charge Happy stuff as we kind of develop that concept and start, really building the subscriber base, because, I want it as, a proof that people want an app or a website to search for these things. So we're still building that kind of community and that interest. So I'm going to keep focusing on that, because it also means I get to go on road trips, which I love.
Yeah, it's a great fit. Again, I love that concept. So, well, whenever you get your book ready, let us know. We'd love to have you come back on and talk about it. I've really enjoyed this conversation. Jess, I know we're connected on LinkedIn. That's probably the easiest place to find you. But if folks want to reach out, what's another way that they can reach out, or is LinkedIn probably the ideal way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, I would say LinkedIn is best. I'm most active on there, and people can just search me, Jess Shanahan. I should, pop up. There's not many of us. But there's also jesshanahan.com, which is my website. And that's where people can find out like what events I'm going to be at, my latest content, all of that kind of stuff.
Fantastic. Well, I encourage everybody to reach out, because we've been connected a long time. I love your content. I love everything you're doing. And it's great to get a different perspective from across the pond, as they say, what's going on in Europe and the UK and specifically. So, Jess, thanks again for joining us. I really appreciate that work that you're doing and the real world perspective that you're bringing to the EV conversation, because it really does matter. So, everybody listening, if this episode got you thinking, do us a favor, like the video, subscribe, hit that alert bell so you don't miss any future episodes. We're talking with experts like Jess all the time. And if you don't want to miss anything, again, hit that alert bell. If you got any thoughts, questions, or even some spicy pushback, drop it in the comments. I mean, we're here for some real talk. Until next time, keep questioning that narrative. Thanks.